Gaming Trend recently got the chance to play Outer Worlds, Obsidian's new open-world first-person RPG, where we were given free reign to explore one of the game's early areas, the Monarch Wilderness. In this video, I'll run through a couple of quests, which gives me a chance to show off some combat and some of the dialogue options. But first, let's take a look at how you build your character. We got to play around with the character creator in the demo, which gives you a lot of control over how you look. You can start with presets and adjust their options to make any kind of character you want, or make some truly heinous creations with the random generator. We can't show you that part of the game yet, nor can we show you the first 40 minutes or so that we played, but let's take a look at leveling up a character that is a bit farther in the game. As you can see here, there are a ton of different stats to level up. We started the demo with a pretty well-rounded character, but you can also specialize heavily. Each of the major skills here, melee, range, defense, and so on, increases the sub-skills under it. So putting points in dialogue will up your persuade, lie, and intimidate skills, while points in stealth increase sneak, hack, and lockpick. Every 20 points you invest into a sub-skill will get you a new bonus. Sometimes it's something simple, like a % increase to armor, but it could also be something more interesting, like a chance to frighten enemies when you attack them, causing them to cower in fear, or an entirely new ability, like power attacks for melee weapons, or the ability to repair your gear in the field. Once you hit 50 points in any skill, you start putting points into sub-skills instead. So rather than adding points to melee, you would choose to specialize in one- or two-handed weapons. It's an interesting system, and it gives you an easy way to become a generalist, adding points to a broad category of skills all at once, while still being able to really drill down to enhance the specific ways you want to play. There are also perks, which seem like a mixed bag of ways to further specialize your character. Some of them are statistical increases, like improved chance to score critical hits, while later perks get a bit more interesting. For instance, this pair of Tier 2 perks gives you a chance to refresh the cooldown of your companion's abilities when you use a different companion's ability, or shorten those cooldowns each time you get a kill. Overall, I really like the degree of character customization you have, and I particularly like that it's not a set progression tree. You can choose any perk you want from the current tier you're on, so you will never have to waste a perk point on something you don't want just to unlock a specific perk later down the line. I started the demo by going to a settlement called Fallbrook, a community built into the side of a cliff and shaded by these giant trees that appeared throughout the area where I played. I was asked by this half-assed steampunk cosplayer to retrieve a shipment of drugs that went missing after he had the brilliant idea to have them carried by trained lizards called sprats. It's about as basic as an early RPG quest can get, but along the way I was happy to find that Obsidian followed the #1 rule of good game design: always hide cool stuff behind waterfalls. Thanks to that, I was able to trade out my starting armor for something that looked less like a knockoff Rocketeer action figure, and I also found a plasma cannon that I used a lot later. After finishing one step of the quest, and not finding too much of interest to do in Fallbrook, aside from listening to whatever it is this guy is talking about.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Can you not see I'm walking here? Physically, you mean? In my mind, I have traveled galaxies. Well, it is of no consequence, I assure you. I'm not entirely decided. If I'm being honest, I think I'd fancy a visit to Tartarus.
I went in search of a more interesting quest to follow. I found it by talking to one of my companions, Nyoka. We started the demo with these companions, so I really don't know where they came from or too much about them, but it looks like they'll be getting pretty in-depth backstories to explore.
Friends. 6 of us. We were on Monarch when the corporations pulled out, and we helped a lot of people pick up the pieces.
Nyoka led me on a quest to later arrest the members of her former crew, which is how I spent most of my time in the demo. After clearing her friend's gravesite and returning a lost memento, I was tasked with tracking down an information broker named Hiram, who was holed up in a sort of fortress in the hills. After we fought our way in, with the help of some easily fooled corporate security goons, we found Hiram, who not only set us on the next stage of Nyoka's quest, but also provided some intel on the game's larger corporate power struggle. What I liked about this is that it all seems to be totally optional. You could choose not to get involved in your companions' backstories at all, and in the process, you'd presumably be missing out on learning more about the main story as well as getting closer to your companions.
We ought to camp out here tonight, you know? Make a fire, sing songs.
In combat and while exploring, my companions seemed mostly like blank slates, occasionally commenting on our surroundings or the characters we met, but during this quest line, Nyoka started to come alive a lot more. It seems like there will be a lot to dig into for people who want to explore their relationships with their companions. Throughout this questline and the rest of the demo, we got into a lot of fights. It seems like everywhere I turned in this area, there was either a roadblock set up by bandits, or a horde of these giant insects just waiting to pounce on anyone who came by. The area we played in was essentially a wasteland that had been left to get by on its own when most of the big corporations pulled out. So this may not be the case in every area of the game, but at least in this area, it never quite felt like a place that existed on its own. It was more like a map dotted with enemies for you to find. And as far as I could see, there was also no way to back out of fights once you started them. At one point, I hopped into a restricted area, expecting to be able to talk my way through, but the guards immediately opened fire, and didn't stop hunting me down even when I ran from the area. It's a small detail that just makes the world feel a bit less real, and it seems like something that high charisma characters at least would want to be able to do. Gunplay doesn't feel quite as good as it would in a full-fledged first-person shooter, but I think it sits somewhere between that and the most recent Fallout games. The biggest problem I had with it was that it can be hard to parse what's going on in combat when there are dense particle effects flying around everywhere, and I had to pay more attention to health bars than to the enemies themselves to know when they were going down. That doesn't mean it's not fun to play though. Each of your companions has a special ability that you can trigger in combat to take down larger enemies, and you get a time dilation effect that lets you target specific body parts to apply debuffs, or just get a few free shots off. In the low-level encounters I played, targeting specific body parts to daze or hobble enemies seemed a bit less effective than just getting in as many shots as you could, but I could see it being a really fun system in tougher encounters. Weapons themselves also had their ups and downs. Melee weapons in general felt a bit weightless, but it is fun to send enemies ragdolling away with them. Some guns, like the electrically charged rifle I found, were a blast to use, and the same goes for that plasma cannon. Others, though, were pretty lackluster, like a flamethrower that felt a bit more like using a leaky hose. Most of the fights that I saw were small, contained skirmishes with a few scattered enemies, but the combat feels way better when you're charging into fortified enemy positions. In this fight that I found late in the demo, I felt like I really had to play to the strengths of both my loadout and my companion's abilities, while using the environment to my advantage at the same time. It's easy to see how fights later in the game might get a lot more complex and a lot more fun at the same time. On the whole, the dialogue skills I encountered were a bit less convincing. It seemed like I always had options to schmooze my way through encounters, no matter which dialogue skills I chose to specialize in, and from what I could see, choosing an option you have enough skill in is just an automatic success. I can understand the developers not wanting people to feel like they put points in to use the skills, but it does make all the dialogue skills seem pretty much identical, and they're essentially just ways to get a better outcome without any extra effort. It feels especially absurd when you can blatantly contradict yourself in the course of conversation and not suffer any consequences. At one point in Nyoka's quest, I come across the corporate compliance crew, who are defending the area from bandits, and I try to convince them to come with me. First, I tell them that I didn't come to this area through a nearby cavern, because they have orders to kill anyone who did. Then they bring up their leader, who I say I've never met. Immediately afterward, I tell them that I had just talked to their leader in the caverns that I didn't come through, and that he had made me their new leader. And that was it. They agreed to follow my orders from then on. It makes the dialogue feel like a bit of a cheat, since it seems like no matter what you do, you always get the best result. The dialogue itself, though, is pretty funny. Not, like, laugh out loud funny most of the time, but it's clever. A lot of the game's humor comes from characters' reflexive deference to the corporations that rule every aspect of their lives and keep them in a state of uncritical, self-policing servitude, which is completely apolitical and has nothing at all to do with the current state of the world, and I'm curious to see how long that shtick can carry itself without getting old. Some of the most interesting stuff that I saw was in how certain characters might bend corporate laws to get what they want without technically breaking them, and I'm eager to see how much that idea is explored. Overall, I found a lot to like about The Outer Worlds, and a lot that I didn't like as much as I expected to. It has plenty of the personality that you'd expect from the creators of Fallout, mixed with some more modern game design sensibilities that make it more approachable and heavier on the action. My biggest concern is that Obsidian's attempt to let you play the game however you want, and to reward you no matter which way you choose to solve problems, could actually make those choices feel less important, since you get the same result either way. Still, I've only played a small fraction of the game, and I'm eager to see how different things feel at higher levels, and explore more of the strange worlds Obsidian's created.